Well, hello, EmpoweRx community. It's MK Bryan, and we have a wonderful guest with us today, Crosby Steen. So, Crosby, can you introduce yourself to us? Tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, and your entrepreneurial passions.
Yeah, sure. So I've always kind of had an entrepreneurial spirit, just being kind of a, very independent-minded person. I've always just kind of had that independent spirit. So obviously, this type of business, entrepreneurship, and on the medical side, is something that is fairly not talked about a lot too.
Right.
So me going through the whole process and building my own business, building my own practice, basically, has been a fun idea. Now, for people that don't know, I basically have here a independent nursing practice, which is people are like, well, how do you do that? And it's been a process for me, but that's what I do now. I do my own business. I pay myself. I have my own clients. I have my own patients,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's kind of where I am now. Now my background is ER nursing, is travel nursing mainly.
Okay.
I go by the Nomad Nurse. That's the name of my business. That's the name of my YouTube. That's the name of my Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And I named it the Nomad Nurse because it kind of, that's where it all started for me. Was travel nursing, and the reason I like travel nursing was because you didn't have to play the politic game of being a staff nurse, and you had a lot more freedom. You were bouncing around every 3 months to a different assignment, and you had just a lot more freedom and a lot more money. And so that's kind of what brought me into where I'm at now.
Awesome. I know that you and I connected on a Facebook group for independent clinician entrepreneurs. And when we connected, you were already up and running as a business owner. As you're talking about, you have a practice. And I know you do, obviously with COVID, you've been stepping into doing a lot of COVID testing. And I think even now, potentially stepping into vaccines, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, that's right.
And so you already had that entrepreneurial spirit. You already had a foundation under you of running that type of business. And then you wanted to really expand that into while you're working in a clinical bedside type of role to be able to work for yourself. And that's where you and I connected.
Yeah, and I think I kind of had the idea at first, and we talked about this, the wrong idea at first, that, hey, I want to start a travel nurse company. And I think it's funny because I think everyone at some point that's a nurse thinks that they can start their own company, right?
Yep.
And they don't really understand what all goes into it.
Yeah.
But then as you go down that path, you realize that independent nursing practice is really the better way to go in the long run anyways. And I had to come to that realization as well, but then I started looking more into it, and the more it intrigued me, and I was fascinated with it. And, I was able to take contracts here locally. And I put a lot of people onto that independent contractor mindset.
Yeah.
And, I think that when you really look, it's kind of a hard concept to explain to other nurses, especially if they have their mind set on, they want to start their own nursing practice, because it's not something you can just say right away, well, this is what you got to do. And then with all the steps that you have to take to be a nursing travel agency, it really isn't worth it at all.
Yeah.
But you have to get that to the other nurses. When I'm talking to them, I don't even talk about travel nurse agency. I just go straight into independent contracting now, because when I'm trying to convey this to other nurses.
Yeah.
Because that concept to them, they don't really understand it sometimes.
Yeah, I have those conversations every day, with our discovery calls, people interested in what we're doing and our mission. And it 9 times out of 10, it starts out with, well, I thought I'd start by, contracting myself, and then I want to get my friends and I want to contract everyone else. And I often ask the question, where's the value in that? Where do you see that being a valuable thing for you to do? And then talking about workers' compensation, insurance, and what happens if someone doesn't show up for a shift? Like just these basic things.
Compliance too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the compliance pieces. And so I say, that's always an option. But, let me plant some seeds to help you think about this in a different capacity. And obviously, that's where a lot of the things that we're doing, moving towards the future are focused on. But I wanted to kind of circle back to you getting your first direct contract, because obviously a lot of people in the audience, they're just starting out, and they're interested in doing that. And you were able to do that really, really quickly. You said regionally. And I wanted you to just share a bit more about that, because from my perspective and somebody who was, on the journey with you, it seemed like it was all about relationships, which is what I typically tell people. So I'd love to hear your version of that.
So, yeah, and that's a good point. So last year, I think it was either March or April, whenever COVID was hitting pretty bad. I was still working before I was really fully engaged in what I'm doing now. And I still work at that hospital, PRN. I go into the ER and work probably twice a month now, just to kind of keep my skills fresh. So I had that relationship with this hospital down here in South Georgia, but they needed people. And at the time, I didn't kind of know what direction my business was going. I didn't really know if I wanted to leave the state, but they needed the help. So obviously, you have a supply and demand. They needed nurses. I told them I was thinking about travel nursing probably a month before that. And then I knew the CEO, I knew the CFO, I knew all the people that worked there, because it's a fairly small hospital.
Right.
But I had already kind of cemented myself into the area of, like, I was trustworthy. I already had built a relationship with that particular hospital. And I said, well, I'll tell you what I can do. I said, look, I'll do I explained to them what I was doing with independent contracting and travel nursing. And I explained to them, because they needed nurses. They literally had different travel companies wanting to, charge them $100 and something an hour. And that's where I came in. I think we settled on it was $80 an hour. $80 an hour is what I think we settled on at the time. And, they got me for almost, 25% less than what they would have to pay a travel company. And so I kind of went through that process. It did take a little bit for me to kind of talk them not into it, because they wanted me there, but they just weren't sure, because they had never dealt with that before.
Right.
So, once I sat down and once I showed them, how it works and all of that, they were game. It's a concept that sells itself once you explain it to them.
Right. And the cost savings is usually such an obvious, win-win situation for everybody. It's just getting through the bureaucracy of it, and when I listen to your story, and I remember when it was all happening, it's those relationships. And that's something, in the current paradigm, the MSP systems and the VMS systems are actively working to not have people build relationships, whether it's from an agency perspective or a medical professional perspective. But if you have the ability to do that, especially in these smaller regional or community hospitals, it's really the best way to get yourself started. And so, yeah,
for sure. So the other thing, I had a thought of, just let me think about, when you have, I try to tell people, stick to critical access hospitals, rural hospitals, smaller hospitals, because the layer of bureaucracy isn't there. Yeah. So try to build relationships with a little bit smaller hospitals. That's another kind of thing I want to throw out there. because the larger hospitals usually have an I mean, everyone's have an HR department, but it's not, it's huge, it's bureaucratic.
Right.
Getting through that process. It's not that it can't be done, because it can. It's just easier when you stick to a rural or a smaller critical access type hospital, at least in my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. We really focus on that from a company perspective and also just from a coaching perspective, because the other aspect of that, for us kind of looking at our full, dynamic mission is that critical access and rural hospitals need the cost savings, and they
Absolutely.
need the clinical talent that's top quality, that can work, multidimensionally, and because you've got, small amount of people on staff, so you need those really dynamic clinicians. And typically, you as proof of this, the folks that we work with are top of their game. You've
Right.
got to have a certain mindset to be like, you know what, I think I want to do this on my own. And so it kind of naturally weeds out and vets people just, based on the whole entire concept. So,
Right.
but
Right.
that's a really great point.
Yeah.
So,
That's,
yeah,
go ahead.
no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to kind of, segue into, when we talk about, your success with this and the advice that you give those that are seeking it. We started to mention the current, model that's out there with the MSPs and the VMS and those larger systems and larger, entities that are out there is, basically roadblocks to any type of direct relationship. And so what's your take on, as someone who's traveled within, the system, and then obviously now doing it on your own, what's your whole entire take on, the major issues with the current model and kind of where it's going and what needs to change?
Well, the current model is corporate, is corporatism. I mean, that's what it is. And I mean, you got big time money coming into this thing. I mean, hedge fund level money.
Oh yeah.
Supporting these companies, but that also leaves them vulnerable, because for people like us, and to kind of maneuver around that, because they're so large. Now, I believe that model, will it go away? No, because it's so large and kind of anchored in there. However, these other, you need to keep in mind, and you just said it earlier, these smaller hospitals can't afford to pay American Mobile or paying all these other, they just can't do it. They will not bring them in because they can't afford it. So that's where you need to find those hospitals and exploit that to your advantage if you're an independent contractor. Because they won't, I mean, if they do, even with the time of COVID, a lot of people are bringing in the National Guard to help them out. And that's not unusual. So you can exploit those areas if, you just have to be a little kind of cunning about it and how you do it and kind of be smart about it, but it's absolutely doable. And, you're doing it for yourself. I can't, you can talk about money all till we're, blue in the face, but really It's about being independent and being in control of your own destiny.
Right.
I can't, it's not about the money. If I was paying $50 an hour, $80 an hour, if you told me you're going to give me $50 an hour and I was going to be independent, or say $80 or $100 an hour, and I had to go work for AMN, I'd say, hell no, I'd go work for myself in a heartbeat.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's not even close.
Absolutely.
So,
and I think it's interesting that you point out, these larger corporate, and it's crony capitalism, and somewhat of a monopoly type of structure when you look at all the facts and kind of dig into it. But I also agree that, yes, obviously they're large, and there's always going to be a place for those types of companies, but I think they are vulnerable. And I think that COVID and everything that's happened the last year has really exposed those vulnerabilities in a lot of capacities, even though like AMN still brought in 2.22 billion in 2020, but they have shareholders
Right.
make happy. Whereas, there's a huge advantage to companies like us or like your company that doesn't have that type of accountability and can pivot and offer some different value.
And it's hard to get that concept to people, but it's the same thing that I do here in my practice. People can come to me and get a COVID test in 5 minutes, pay out of pocket, and be out, or they can go see their doctor, wait in there for 2.5 hours, right? Go to the health department, which is only testing about twice a week, or
wow.
And once that's a great example of this on even in this area as well. Right. So what I'm saying is you get these big corporations, big hospitals, big doctors' offices, or whatever. They're slow moving. And you as an independent contractor or an independent person, you can always exploit that. Now they're vulnerable because they would be very vulnerable if more people embrace this philosophy. Yeah. If more nurses embrace this philosophy and kind of got the entrepreneurial spirit, because it would take down the whole system if every nurse thought this way. The problem is that nurses and medical people, they like to think that there's always, and there are rules when you're giving medicines and things like that, but they still think that the business side of it, they got to follow this rule and do this. Well, you don't have to when it comes to business. You need to be a lot more aggressive about how you approach this, but getting that to nurses because they're so health oriented is very hard sometimes. You have a lot of people that want to be entrepreneurs, but don't really in nursing, but don't really want to embrace what it means to be an entrepreneur, what it means to hustle, and what it means to even be broke for a little while. Yeah. They don't want to do that. They just want the idea of it. And that's what I see as one of the bigger problems. I have the emails list to prove it, all the people that want to do it. Right. However, the people that are going to follow through with it is going to be the kind of hard part of getting them to embrace that philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's such a clear difference, obviously working with people one-on-one for 3 years in this capacity. And you try to explain that, the best that you can up front, the persistence that it takes to really do this. And, one day of cold calling doesn't do it, if you're going to go that route. No. And then it's just like, then with the agency there as the backup, it's like, I'll just go take this job with the agency, which is totally legitimate. That's what I always say. There's always options to do that, but you do have to have a certain grit. You do have to have a certain persistence and mindset in order to be able to do it.
When you go down that route and you decide that you're going to give up your freedom for that security, you're going to lose that freedom. You're going to lose that independence. So I would rather hustle a day or two extra cold calling than have to go work for AMN ever again.
Absolutely. I agree. I've got the same mindset. I totally agree. And, our whole goal and everything that we've been working towards is to make it streamline, make it more accessible, normalize it, and to really shed light on so much that people just don't understand. People are kind of got blinders on and don't understand. When I tell people that AMN made $2.22 billion last year, $1 billion, and I'm like, people are like, what? They can't believe it. And I'm like, that's open source information. Right. You can find that. And it's that's what we're trying to do, is just really kind of normalize it, which I know, and
that's what y'all are in the hard part. Y'all are actually where the rubber meets the road. And this is the hard part of that, is doing it on a mass, or trying to scale it, trying to, and I think it can work. I just think it's just going to take time. It's going to take education.
Yeah.
And educating the nurses on that. And I think it's going to take time, but I love what you guys are doing. I think that it's, I refer people to you all the time, people that come in my office that are travel nurses doing drug screens. I say, hey, you need to check out this, give MK a call or something like that. I do it all the time.
Yeah, no, I know you've been an amazing partner. We really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, kind of looking to the future, where do you see nursing in 5 to 10 years, and where do you see travel nursing in 5 to 10 years, just in general?
So the reality of it is that I don't see it getting any better. As far as I see more nurses doing travel nursing, I feel like the companies are going to get bigger, but that also, again, that's not going to change. I think the opportunity lies in people that are more fluid. Independent contractors there's going to be more jobs out there. I think healthcare is going to be one of the main sources of prosperity in the next 10 years. If you do it right and if you're smart about it, you can make a lot of money in it. I think that it's going to take that, but I think there's so many people in society now that are not taught entrepreneurship, are not taught independence. They're taught to be drones. They're taught to, this goes to early conditioning and starting in kindergarten. And I don't know how you combat that. That's why I think that as far as the economic side, I don't see that changing because people want that security so quick. I mean, our society is moving away from that kind of independent spirit that we used to have, in the past to a more, I hate to say it, but a more socialist community type of mindset. Right. And that's with young people. So I don't see it get any better from that front because you have to have an independent mindset to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the things that I'm curious to get your take on as far as, you said more and more people traveling. I know one of the big things we've seen with COVID in the last year, especially with these enormous rates from the government infusing money to these hospitals, and these crucial agencies and the critical agencies, is a lot of people are leaving bedside to go travel. And, especially in areas like the Southeast of the United States, I mean, they're really kind of struggling because rates are so low there for staff. So they're like, man, I can get $65 an hour, which is not even a really great travel rate, but it's like, huge money.
I think it's hilarious because you're starting to see the good side on that. On the flip side of that is you're starting to see these people that are staff nurses, complaining online all the time about, we have nobody here. Well, you know what? When you take a staff job and you want to be in that, you want to, have that security and that you're going to get screwed over by the corporate aspect of it. And that's just the reality of it. And now nurses, the good side is, are seeing their worth at least at some level and saying, hey, I want to go make some real money. I don't want to be sitting here at a staff job getting $24 an hour. I mean, that's ridiculous. So, I think on that end, I think it's hilarious because if you're a staff nurse, you better wake up. I mean, you better wake up because they're not ever going to pay you. You can bitch about on Instagram all you want to about how they need to pay nurses more and this and that. But until you go get paid more, they're not going to do it. So, yeah, I mean, that it's been funny to me. I probably shouldn't get so much happiness out of it, but I do.
I know it's probably frightening for the hospital administrators. And I see that there's been quite a few strikes and things like that in Oregon and Massachusetts specifically. Do you think unions are a good answer to some of that? What's your take on that?
Typically, I'm not a union person just because I'm an independent libertarian capitalist, right? So, but there are some cases that I do believe that unions actually have a lot of good, and nursing is one of them. Yeah, I actually do believe that the nursing unions are a good, rational type of union. I'm not talking about these other unions, but in the realm of nursing, I believe that nursing unions are good.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think they have value, and I was totally flabbergasted when I was reading about St. Charles Health System in Oregon. They were going to strike, and then the hospital's like, well, here, we'll give you like $1 million to the union. And I'm like, why don't you just pay them more? Because it was all money they had socked away.
Yeah, and then if
contractors.
If they start doing that, obviously I don't like what unions do. If they take that, the big union people get paid and then they don't end up paying the nurses. As long as it's benefiting the nurses, that get paid, not the unions. If the unions are actually helping the nurses get paid more, then I'm all for it. Because at the end of the day, that's what I want, is I want to see nurses paid more.
Absolutely. I think people, the everyday American who doesn't really understand the healthcare system and the private equity and all the things that are going on in healthcare and what a business it is, I think they would be shocked at what nurses' wages are on average. And then obviously, you know, again, if you look at areas like the Southeast and stuff where nurses do not get paid enough money,
Right.
And they have no idea. They think
Florida,
nurses are
is a
making,
great example of that.
yeah. Yeah, I
Florida
think
is a
nurses are making six figures, and I'm like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Not unless you're traveling. So yeah, I totally agree. So tell us a little bit about. I know we've heard about your YouTube channel, but just tell people where they can find you and how to subscribe to you and check out your content. 'Cause you've got a lot of great content, you know, that just is above and beyond independent entrepreneurship.
Oh yeah. And I mean, I got a lot of, I think 300 something videos. I haven't posted a video in over a month, maybe 2 months, because I've been so busy here in the office. And I think I told you before we started, there's not enough time in the day right now for me. And I'm glad I was able to do this. But you can find me on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. I'm a little bit active, but I mainly use that Twitter to post on Instagram. So I'm not too active on Twitter as far as followers, but Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and that's pretty much it. I want to do a whole series at some point on independent contracting, and maybe do some type of class where people can. I don't know how I'm going to do it yet. I'm just brainstorming in my head, but I definitely want to do something in the next month or so with that.
Absolutely. Well, we'd be happy to help you out and support you like you've supported us. We appreciate all that you do to spread the word and, talk about your success with your audience, and even on Facebook and all the places that people can find you. And certainly appreciate you taking the time this afternoon, because I know you got a lot going on, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Crosby.
Thanks. See you guys.